Welcome to Climate Quickies, bite-sized nuggets of climate goodness from our TEDxLondon experts in under 5 minutes.
In this week's Climate Quickie, we hear from Josephine Latu-Sanft, an international communications specialist and native Tongan turned Londoner. Josephine shares what COP27 means to boss states, meaning big ocean sustainable states found in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. They lie close to sea level and are therefore more susceptible to the impacts of climate change. This is part of a broader conversation about why and how we need to reframe the representation of climate vulnerable communities and what they want to see from this year's COP. Over to Josephine, and remember, stay curious.
So COP27, right? Really looking forward to it. This will be the Africa COP. And I think it's a chance, it's an opportunity for people to focus on issues in countries such as in countries in Africa and see what kinds of solutions or what kinds of innovations are coming out of that part of the world. And also for developing countries in general, right? Including small island developing states, or as we like to call ourselves, big ocean sustainable states or boss states. Yeah. As we've talked about before, a lot of the time there's parts of the world that we normally see portrayed as struggling as victims, only victims of climate change, and who just have lots of lack of capacity, lack of economy, lack of solutions. And I think this time, being in Africa is a chance to show that, look, it's time to hear what sorts of amazing innovations and developments are coming out of this part of the world, because there are a lot. And, the continent of Africa has the largest youth population in the world. And what are these young people coming up with? What is important to them? How are they framed? What are they seeing the issues for their future? I think the key issues, this year obviously will be finance, climate finance, whether we can finally deliver on this elusive 100 billion in climate finance that was promised in 2009 to help developing countries cope with climate change. And again, it's a lot of this. The numbers may throw you off because you think 100 billion is a lot. But if you think of how much the G7, the 7 industrialized countries of the world make every year, right? About 42 trillion. This is like 0.2% of that, right? I mean, obviously, every year, what young people, what they bring to the table is always one of the most exciting things about COPs. The fire they bring and the focus and the commitment. I mean, it gives me hope. It gives me hope that actually, the leaders, the ones in the next generations, they're going to be super aware, and they're going to be already ready to make the decisions on that. It's just that, should we have to wait for that, or should we actually put them in the leader seat now? Because they seem like clear about this.
Mm-hmm. And do you think, very specifically for, and I love this new acronym, Big Ocean Sustainable States?
BOSS.
Are there any specific priorities there or are there specific conversations or outcomes that you would love to see?
For boss states, big ocean states, I think for us, naturally being in the middle of the ocean, we'd like to see more on what they call the ocean climate nexus. So a lot of the climate conversation is driven about cutting down emissions. That is the overarching goal, is about cutting down the carbon emissions in the atmosphere. For us, because our livelihoods and our lives revolve around the ocean, we think we need to bring that more powerfully into the conversation. I mean, the ocean is the greatest carbon sink. It holds and sucks out more carbon than the rainforest, right? But in doing that, it affects the organisms down at the bottom of the ocean, the corals and all of that. It warms the ocean, and that changes the environment for marine species, and therefore the marine species that we depend on for our ocean economies, etc. I mean, the environment that we depend on for our economies. And again, the ocean covers 70% of the earth. It has a huge role to play in the climate system. But because it's so vast and it's always there, it is nowhere in the Paris Agreement except maybe one or two mentions as a carbon sink, right? So it's funny, right? Because people think like, yeah, climate and oceans, they're kind of the same, but it's not. It's actually, when you come to the COP negotiations, it's always like a side event, or, it's not in the agenda. But I think we're making a lot of progress on that, thanks to the advocacy of island nations. So that's a priority for us. And also, when we talk about, what are priorities for this year, these are the same priorities. It's addressing climate change, ramping up ambition. It's been the same for decades. We haven't gotten there. We're inching forward, but we need to move faster. So a lot of those messages are going to be the same, right? But they're important. It doesn't diminish the importance of that for island nations.
Thanks for listening to this Quickie.
This episode was created by our superstar podcast team at TEDxLondon and supported by our headline partner, the global bank, Citi. Until next time,
stay curious.